You don't belong in this school." The words hit like a slammed door. The polished hallways, the portraits of famous alumni on the walls, the expensive shoes clicking past. And in the middle of it all stood Naomi Carter, 16 years old, an orphan, her skin dark as summer midnight, carrying a patched-up backpack and eyes trained not to cry in public. It was scholarship exam day at Riverton Preparatory School, an elite academy in the wealthy suburbs of Atlanta, where families arrived in shiny SUVs and children grew up believing the world was made for them. Naomi took a deep breath. She remembered her grandmother's voice. "When the world shuts a door in your face, child, God will open a window. Look up." And that's when the impossible began to unfold. Before we continue, I'd love to know where you're watching from today. And if you're enjoying these stories, make sure you're subscribed to the channel. The iron gates of Riverton Preparatory stood tall, guarding its secrets. The golden letters of the school's name gleamed under the morning sun. Naomi stopped outside, clutching the strap of her worn-out backpack. Her sneakers, one size too big, had been donated by the church. She looked up at the marble columns, the manicured gardens, the flawless glass windows. An elderly woman walking a poodle eyed her from behind her glasses, then quietly crossed the street. Naomi felt the old instinct to shrink, to apologize for being there, but her grandmother's words returned, soft yet firm. "Stand tall, child. Whoever walks with God doesn't walk bowed." She straightened her back and stepped through the gates. Inside, the lobby smelled of polished wood and expensive flowers. Parents whispered about Ivy League universities and summer internships. Girls with matching headbands giggled at something on their phones. Naomi approached the reception desk. The secretary, a woman in a crisp blue blazer, looked up with a rehearsed smile, which quickly faded when she saw the backpack. "Can I help you?" she asked, her last word hanging in the air. Naomi held out her letter of invitation. "I'm here for the scholarship exam." The secretary skimmed it, her brows furrowing. "You're Carter? Naomi Carter?" "Yes, ma'am." "The exam is for the excellence program. It's very demanding." She stressed very, as though it were a mountain. "The waiting room is down the hall, but—" She hesitated. "Are you sure you're in the right place?" Before Naomi could answer, a tall man in a tailored suit strode over. His badge read, "Dr. Whitmore, Executive Director." Parents greeted him like a senator. His sharp eyes landed on Naomi. "Is there a problem?" he asked the secretary, never breaking his gaze from the girl. "Candidate for the scholarship exam," she replied. He scanned Naomi from head to toe, pausing at the frayed seams of her backpack, her oversized sneakers, her tightly pulled hair. "Name?" "Naomi Carter." "What school are you from?" "East Maple Public," she answered steadily. "These are my grades." She handed him a folder, spotless report cards, a few cheap medals from science fairs, a wrinkled letter of recommendation from her public school principal. "Doctor." Whitmore flipped through the papers too quickly to truly read them. Before he could respond, a blonde teenager walked in, glued to her phone. Her lanyard read, "Chloe Whitmore." The last name filled the air like perfume. "Dad, my tennis coach just texted." She stopped, noticing Naomi. Her eyes scanned her from hair to skin to shoes like she was inspecting a clearance rack item. The corner of her mouth curled in a smirk. "The exam begins in 15 minutes, the secretary hurried to say. "Room C12. "Take her," Dr. Whitmore ordered curtly. "And make sure everything is in order." Naomi whispered a thank you and followed the hall, laughter and whispers trailing behind her. Around the corner, she nearly bumped into Mr. Alvarez, a math teacher in rolled-up sleeves carrying a stack of papers. "Sorry about that." He smiled genuinely. "New face here. First day?" "Scholarship exam," Naomi replied. "Ah, good luck." He tilted his head. "How do you feel about numbers?" "At home with them," she said, her hands trembling just a little less. "They make sense to me." "Numbers always tell the truth," he whispered, almost like a secret, even when people try to hide it. The words stayed with her as she entered room C12. Inside, desks were spaced evenly under beams of perfect sunlight. 6 other candidates sat waiting, all with brand new backpacks and shiny pens. A girl with a ponytail leaned to whisper, "Look at that backpack." "She's lost." The boy beside her snickered. "The charity program must be down the street." Naomi pretended not to hear. She took the back seat, placing on the desk a borrowed library pen and a stub of a pencil. She reached under the desk, touching a tiny necklace charm, the only keepsake from her grandmother. "Lord, walk with me, even if the hallway is long." The door opened. In walked Mrs. Eleanor Delaney, academic director. Tall, regal, glasses chained in gold. Behind her a cart of sealed folders. Her voice cut through the air. "Good morning. You're here because Riverton demands the best. We accept no mediocrity. Some of you will discover that today." Her eyes swept the room, then froze on Naomi, as though she were the wrong note in a symphony. "Especially today," she added. She handed out test booklets with sharp, precise movements. When she reached Naomi, she paused just long enough to whisper so only she could hear. "Not everyone was born for this place." The words stung like ice. Naomi kept her eyes on the test cover. "You will have 60 minutes, Mrs. Delaney announced. No phones, any questions?" Silence. "Begin." The digital clock dropped from 60 low to 59:59. Naomi opened the booklet. Advanced math, critical reading, logic. Difficult, but manageable. Until the last section. 3 pages of symbols and notations she had never seen before. Her pen froze. Someone behind her chuckled. Naomi breathed slowly. She remembered another hard morning. In the hospital, when her grandmother, voice weak, had held her hand. "If they push you out, don't ask for permission to step back in, just walk in. God already gave you the key the world can't see." Naomi turned back to the first problems, one at a time. Solve one, then another. The pencil danced, shaky at first, then steady. The clock read 52:17 when Dr. Whitmore entered again, whispering with Mrs. Delaney. In the hall, Chloe peeked through the window, recording secretly on her phone. Mrs. Delaney circled the room, heels clicking. She stopped behind Naomi, glanced at the untouched last section and whispered again. "Some parts are beyond what certain schools teach. It's normal to fail here." Normal. The word felt like an invitation to surrender. Naomi refused it. 49:03. She closed her eyes for a moment, seeing the patterns she'd studied late at night with free videos and second-hand books. When she opened them, the page looked different. 44:21. A boy in the front row asked for extra paper, throwing a smirk back at her like a dart. Naomi bent over the page, determined. 41:08. She raised her hand. "Can we use the margins for notes?" "If that will help," Mrs. Delaney replied, almost amused. It would help. She wrote quickly, chasing hidden structures, repetitions, progressions. For the first time, the impossible began to make sense. 35:12. Mrs. Delaney passed again. For a split second, her brows lifted, just enough to reveal surprise at Naomi's margins filled with reasoning. Naomi's pen flew. She finished before others but held her paper, reviewing every line. This time she smiled. God never abandons the just. 28:59. Mrs. Delaney stood at the door, her shadow falling across Naomi's desk. Her voice sliced through the silence. "You don't belong in this school." Naomi didn't look up. She placed her pen on the first symbol of the impossible page. If she didn't belong here, then the truth she was about to write would force the school to belong to her. She began her first line of the solution. The exam break bell rang, and the students spilled into the wide marble hallway. Naomi clutched her test booklet, her knuckles white. She had answered every question she could, even dared to scribble through the impossible section. But now came the part she feared more than numbers. People. Clusters of well-dressed teens gathered near the lockers, their laughter echoing like glass breaking. Naomi kept her head down, heading toward the fountain for a sip of water. But the voices followed. "Who let the thrift store model in?" one boy muttered, loud enough for his friends to snicker. "Her backpack looks like it survived the Civil War," another added. The laughter stung sharper than the words. Naomi turned her face away, but Chloe Whitmore wasn't about to let her escape unnoticed. Chloe walked up, her phone camera casually angled as if she were texting, but the red recording light betrayed her. "Smile," Chloe said sweetly. "You're going viral today." Naomi froze. The hall's eyes turned toward her. Before she could reply, Mr. Jennings, a history teacher with a polished beard and sharp tongue, appeared. He spotted Naomi lingering by the fountain and frowned. "Miss Carter, isn't it?" His voice carried enough weight to hush the laughter. For a moment, Naomi thought she'd found an ally, but then he tilted his head, assessing her shoes, her fraying jacket. "Let me offer you some advice. Riverton Prep is not a charity. Students here are bred for greatness. If you're not cut from the same cloth," he paused, smiling thinly, "well, the threads unravel quickly." The laughter roared again, this time harsher. Naomi's throat tightened. She thought of her grandmother's hospital bed, the oxygen machine clicking, her voice whispering, "Don't let them measure your worth by their yardstick. God already measured you, and he said enough." Naomi straightened her back. "Thank you, sir," she said softly. "But I think I'll hold together just fine." The hallway quieted for half a beat. Then Chloe's voice cut through. "We'll see about that." The bell rang again. Naomi headed back toward room C12. Her steps were shaky, but each one carried a stubborn rhythm. Left, right, forward. Inside the classroom, Mrs. Delaney stood by the window, arms folded. She didn't even look at Naomi when she entered, but her lips curled in a knowing smile, as if humiliation had been part of the exam. Naomi sat down, the whispers swirling like smoke around her. She gripped her pencil, pressing so hard it nearly broke. "This is only the beginning," she told herself. And she was right. The storm had only just started. The heavy oak doors of the administration office closed behind Naomi with a soft thud that sounded like a verdict. The secretary had called her name after the exam and led her here, through corridors lined with photographs of alumni in gowns, medals hanging on their chests, smiles carved in marble frames. All of them looked the same, privileged, polished, untouchable. Naomi clutched the strap of her backpack tighter. Her heart thudded in her chest as she sat on a stiff leather chair. The room smelled of books, polish, and something colder, power. Behind the desk sat Mrs. Eleanor Delaney, posture regal, fingers laced together like a queen awaiting a subject. To her left, Dr. Whitmore leaned back, arms crossed, his face unreadable but his eyes sharp, dissecting her. Chloe lounged on a chair by the window, scrolling her phone, barely hiding her smirk. "Miss Carter," Mrs. Delaney began, her tone smooth and practiced. "You do understand the standards of Riverton Preparatory are exceptional." Naomi nodded, trying to keep her voice steady. "Yes, ma'am. That's why I applied. I want to learn where the best are taught." A flicker of irritation passed across Delaney's face, as if humility wasn't the answer she expected. "Ambition is admirable," she continued, "but reality is less forgiving. Students here are not only bright, they are cultivated, trained, supported. We cannot lower the bar to accommodate." She paused deliberately. "Charity cases." The words hit like a slap. Naomi swallowed hard. "I'm not asking for charity, ma'am. I'm asking for a chance." Chloe finally looked up, laughing softly. "A chance? This isn't a lottery, it's a legacy. People like us don't get into Riverton. We are Riverton." Her father's silence was its own agreement. Mrs. Delaney adjusted her glasses, then opened a folder. Inside were Naomi's exam papers covered in her scribbles and calculations. She held them delicately, as though touching something fragile, unworthy. "Your work shows determination, but determination is not excellence. There are sections here that prove beyond doubt you are not prepared for our level of rigor." Naomi leaned forward. Then why give me the exam? Why invite me at all if you already decided? For a moment, silence. Only the ticking of the brass clock filled the room. Then Dr. Whitmore spoke, his voice calm but laced with steel. The exam is designed to separate those who dream from those who belong. Miss Carter, you may be intelligent in your own sphere, but Riverton is a world apart. The words pressed down on her chest like weights. She gripped the edge of her chair. If the world pushes you out, walk in anyway. Her grandmother's voice whispered in memory. Naomi drew a shaky breath. I may not belong to your world, sir, but numbers don't belong to anyone. Truth doesn't belong to anyone. And I solved your problems, even the ones you said were impossible. For the first time, Mrs. Delaney's mask cracked. A tiny crease between her brows betrayed surprise. Chloe's smirk faltered for a second, then twisted into scorn. Even if you got some answers right, Chloe shot back, nobody here wants you. You'd be a stain on Riverton's name. The words stabbed deeper than the laughter in the hallways. Naomi's throat burned, but she refused to let tears fall. Mrs. Delaney leaned back, her verdict cold and final. Miss Carter, as Director of Academic Affairs, it is my recommendation that your application be reconsidered. Riverton is not the place for you. We will notify you of our decision in writing. The secretary opened the door. The meeting was over. Naomi stood, legs trembling. She wanted to shout, to demand fairness, but the weight of their gazes pinned her down. Instead, she adjusted her backpack, lifted her chin, and walked out. As the doors closed behind her, Chloe's whisper drifted into the hall. You'll never wear our crest. Naomi's eyes blurred, but inside, a quiet fire began to burn. If they thought they could erase her, they had underestimated the strength of a girl who had already lost everything, and still stood. The war for her place at Riverton had officially begun. The announcement came just after lunch. A message echoed through the PA system. Scholarship candidates report to the auditorium immediately. Naomi clutched her backpack as the crowd of wealthy students streamed down the marble hallways, buzzing with curiosity. By the time she stepped into the vast auditorium, she felt every eye turned toward her. The velvet curtains, the polished wooden stage, the gilded school crest above it all. The room wasn't built for fairness. It was built for display. At the center of the stage stood Mrs. Delaney, her posture tall, a stack of folders in her hand. Beside her, Dr. Whitmore folded his arms, while Chloe sat in the front row with her friends, phone already recording. Today, Mrs. Delaney's voice carried through the speakers. We will demonstrate what Riverton expects from its students. Excellence, rigor, brilliance. Her eyes swept the room before landing on Naomi. And we will see whether those who wish to join us are prepared. A murmur ran through the crowd. Naomi's stomach tightened. She hadn't expected this. The director motioned toward a blackboard set up on the stage. Equations and symbols already filled it, lines of complex algebra and abstract notations Naomi had only glimpsed online. The sight made the audience gasp. Even some Riverton students shifted uncomfortably. This, Mrs. Delaney said, is an unsolved problem, one even advanced students here struggle to attempt. Let us see. She paused deliberately. If Miss Carter from East Maple Public can show us her talents. Laughter erupted. Some students clapped mockingly. Chloe raised her phone higher. Naomi's legs trembled as Mrs. Delaney gestured to the stage. Come, Miss Carter, show us. The world seemed to blur as Naomi walked up the steps. Her palms were sweaty, her throat dry. Every instinct screamed at her to run, to flee back to the safety of shadows. But then her hand brushed against the small necklace at her chest. The charm her grandmother had left her. If they push you to the fire, her grandmother's voice echoed, step in. God will keep you from burning. Naomi picked up the chalk. Behind her, voices hissed. She's going to embarrass herself. Poor thing, doesn't even know what she's looking at. The blackboard loomed. The symbols twisted like mocking faces. For a second, panic swallowed her. She closed her eyes. And then she remembered. Late nights in the public library, watching free lectures on a cracked computer, scribbling equations on scraps of paper until her pencil broke. Numbers had always made sense to her in a way people didn't. Patterns whispered to her like songs. She opened her eyes. Instead of trying to solve everything, she focused on one piece, a pattern in the coefficients. She wrote a small line on the side. The crowd laughed at the tiny mark, but she ignored them. Then another line, another connection. Slowly, the laughter softened into murmurs. Minutes passed. Naomi's chalk scratched faster now, filling the blackboard with steps, arrows, and notations. She wasn't solving the entire unsolved problem, but she was dismantling it, breaking it into truths that even the professors in the room couldn't ignore. Mr. Alvarez, watching from the back, leaned forward, his eyes widening. He recognized her process, raw, but brilliant. Chloe, still recording, frowned. This wasn't going how she planned. Finally, Naomi stepped back, breathing hard. Half the problem still stood unsolved, but the part she had unraveled was precise, elegant, undeniable. Silence fell over the auditorium. Mrs. Delaney's face froze, her hands tightening on the folders. She had expected failure, laughter, proof that Naomi didn't belong. Instead, Naomi had done what even Riverton's best often failed to attempt. She had cracked the impossible. Naomi turned to face the room. Her voice shook, but carried. Numbers don't care who you are, they only care if you listen to them. The silence broke, not into applause, but into restless whispers. Some students looked impressed, others looked furious. Mrs. Delaney cleared her throat sharply. That will be enough. Her tone was clipped, brittle. Return to your seat. Naomi set the chalk down gently, like laying a weapon to rest. She walked off the stage under hundreds of stares, some mocking, some curious, some even respectful. She hadn't won. Not yet. But for the first time, she felt the ground beneath her feet was solid, and deep inside she knew. The fight had only begun. The auditorium emptied slowly, but Naomi lingered in her seat, staring at the chalk dust still clinging to her fingers. Whispers echoed in the hallways long after the test was over. Some mocked her, some marveled. All of them reminded her of one thing: she was still an outsider. She lowered her head, clutching her backpack. The sting of Mrs. Delaney's words still pressed against her chest. Riverton is not the place for you. For a moment, the brave mask cracked. She wanted to cry, to vanish, to never walk these marble halls again. She slipped out of the auditorium and wandered into the quiet courtyard. The sun was setting behind the school's towers, painting the sky in strokes of orange and purple. Naomi sank onto a bench near the fountain, where water trickled softly. Alone, at last. Her grandmother's necklace slipped from her collar. Naomi held the tiny charm in her palm, her thumb brushing over its worn edges. And then she heard it. Not in the air, but in memory. Her grandmother's voice, warm and steady, speaking from hospital nights and kitchen mornings. Child, life will call you worthless. People will close doors in your face, but don't you bow to them. Bow only to God. Because when they say you don't belong, He whispers, "You are mine." Tears blurred her vision. Naomi whispered under her breath, "God, are you here? Do you see me?" The fountain bubbled softly. The wind stirred the trees, carrying the faint sound of laughter from the dormitories. Naomi closed her eyes, pressing the charm to her heart. I'm not enough, she thought. Not for them. Maybe not even for this exam. But another memory surfaced. Her grandmother praying at the kitchen table, whispering Psalm 27, her voice trembling yet unbroken. Though an army besiege me, my heart will not fear. Though war break out against me, even then I will be confident. Naomi exhaled, her shoulders loosening. She wasn't alone. She had never been. Somewhere behind her, footsteps approached. She quickly wiped her eyes. It was Mr. Alvarez, holding a stack of papers. He hesitated, then sat on the far end of the bench. "That was remarkable," he said quietly. Naomi shook her head. "I didn't finish. I wasn't good enough." "Not good enough?" He chuckled softly. "Miss Carter, do you know how many Riverton students refuse to even touch that problem? You didn't just touch it, you cracked it. You saw things most people here can't." Naomi looked at him, unsure whether to believe. "Mrs. Delaney doesn't think so," she murmured. Mr. Alvarez sighed. "Mrs. Delaney doesn't see what I see. And maybe she doesn't want to." He leaned closer, lowering his voice. "But remember this. Truth always finds light. Keep holding on." Naomi's chest warmed, though doubt still lingered. After he left, she remained in the courtyard until the stars appeared. She whispered one last prayer into the night. "Lord, if you open this door, give me strength to walk through it. I can't do this alone." And for the first time that day, she felt peace settle inside her. No applause, no victory, just quiet strength. The kind of strength no one else saw. The kind of strength that could change everything. The next morning, the atmosphere at Riverton was electric. Word had spread like wildfire. The orphan girl from East Maple had stood on the auditorium stage and done the unthinkable. Some said she had cheated, others swore she had guessed. A few whispered, reluctantly, that maybe, just maybe, she was brilliant. But one thing was certain: everyone was watching. When Naomi entered room C12 for the second round of testing, dozens of eyes followed her. Chloe sat at the front, arms crossed, her phone already recording under the desk. Her smirk was sharper than ever. Mrs. Delaney stood by the blackboard, folders in hand. "Today we continue," she announced. "Each of you will face problems designed to measure not only knowledge, but composure under pressure. Excellence is not about knowing one answer. It is about standing firm when the world expects you to fall." Her gaze lingered on Naomi. The challenge was clear. Naomi sat down, her fingers brushing the tiny necklace under her blouse. She whispered silently, "Lord, walk with me again." The test began. One by one, students were called to the board. Some faltered, others breezed through. Each mistake drew whispers, each success polite applause. But when Mrs. Delaney called, "Miss Carter," the room fell into a hush so deep Naomi could hear her heartbeat. She rose slowly, her legs steady this time, and walked to the board. A new equation waited, sprawling, complex, with variables stacked like bricks in a wall. The whispers started immediately. "She won't last 2 minutes. This is going to be embarrassing." Naomi took the chalk in her hand. She looked at the problem, and at first, it felt like staring into a storm. But then she remembered what Mr. Alvarez had told her. Numbers always tell the truth. She focused on one piece, then another. The storm began to unravel into rhythm, like a song only she could hear. The chalk moved, slowly at first, then faster. Naomi's hands trembled, but the patterns took shape. A hidden sequence, a symmetry disguised as chaos. Students leaned forward. The whispers grew quieter. Even Mrs. Delaney's sharp eyes narrowed, following each line. 10 minutes passed. Naomi stepped back, her heart pounding. The equation stood solved, every step neat, logical, undeniable. Silence. Then, unexpectedly, someone clapped. It was faint at first, hesitant. Naomi turned and saw Mr. Alvarez at the back of the room, his expression glowing with pride. The sound echoed, and soon others joined. Not all, but enough to ripple through the room. Chloe's face flushed with anger. She slammed her phone down. "She must have memorized it," Chloe hissed loudly. "There's no way she solved that on her own." But even as she spoke, Mrs. Delaney's mask slipped. Her lips pressed into a thin line. For the first time, doubt clouded her authority. Naomi placed the chalk back, whispering in her heart, "Thank you, Lord. This wasn't me alone." The applause faded, but the impression remained. Naomi didn't just survive the impossible, she owned it. And for the first time, Riverton Prep could no longer pretend not to see her. The day after Naomi solved the impossible problem, Riverton buzzed like a disturbed hive. Everywhere she walked, whispers trailed behind her. Some eyes looked at her with awe, others with suspicion, and many with open hostility. At lunch, Naomi carried her tray into the grand dining hall. Chandeliers glittered above the long, polished tables, where clusters of students sat in perfect cliques. Naomi hesitated, scanning for a place to sit. She spotted an empty seat at the far end, but before she reached it, a boy with slicked hair slid into the chair, smirking. "Sorry," he said. "Not sorry at all." Laughter broke out. Naomi turned away, holding her tray tighter. She found an empty corner near the window and sat alone, her back to the room. But Chloe Whitmore wasn't about to let her eat in peace. Surrounded by her entourage, Chloe strutted across the hall, her phone in hand, recording. "Everyone," she announced, her voice carrying like a trumpet. "Meet Riverton's charity case. Solved one little problem and thinks she's Einstein." Her friends erupted in laughter. One boy tossed a crumpled napkin at Naomi's tray. Another mimicked her, hunching over like a beggar. Naomi kept her eyes down, willing herself not to react. "Don't give them the satisfaction," her grandmother's voice whispered in memory. But then Chloe leaned closer, her smile sharp as glass. "Tell us, Naomi. Do they even teach algebra where you come from? Or do you just pray the answers appear?" The words cut. Naomi's cheeks burned. She opened her mouth, but before she could speak, another voice rang out. "Leave her alone." The hall turned. It was Daniel Green, one of Riverton's top students, captain of the debate team. He stood at his table, eyes fixed on Chloe. "She did what none of us could," Daniel continued. "Mock her all you want, but you can't erase that." A stunned silence fell. Chloe's face flushed crimson. "Stay out of this, Daniel," she snapped. "You think defending her makes you noble? It just makes you blind." But Daniel didn't flinch. "No, it makes me honest." The hall erupted into murmurs. Some students nodded, others scoffed. Naomi sat frozen, her heart pounding. For the first time, someone had spoken up for her. Chloe glared at Naomi with a hatred deeper than before. "Enjoy it while it lasts," she whispered as she turned away. "Because soon everyone will see you're a fraud." Her entourage followed, whispering plans. Naomi watched them go, unease curling in her stomach. Later that afternoon, Naomi returned to the library, hoping for silence. She spread her notes across the table, focusing on equations, but whispers drifted in from the corner. "We'll leak her test. Say she cheated." "Yeah, nobody like her solves that on their own." Naomi froze. She recognized the voices, Chloe's friends. Her hands shook as she packed her notes. She didn't want to hear more. As she slipped out of the library, the words followed her like shadows. "We'll destroy her. Just wait." That night, Naomi sat in her tiny room at the orphanage, staring at the necklace in her hand. Fear pressed heavy on her chest. But then she remembered Daniel's voice cutting through the dining hall. "You can't erase that." She whispered into the quiet. "Lord, if they're plotting against me, then be my defense. Let the truth speak louder than lies." And though fear lingered, so did something else. A spark of courage. Because envy was rising like a storm. But storms, Naomi knew, always pass. The rumors spread faster than fire. By the next week, half the school believed Naomi had cheated. The whispers followed her everywhere. She must have stolen the answers. Someone fed her the problem ahead of time. There's no way a girl from East Maple Public could do that. Naomi walked the hallways with her shoulders tense, her eyes fixed on the floor. Each laugh behind her felt like a dagger. Each phone camera that pointed her way felt like a trap. One afternoon, while she studied quietly in the library, two boys passed by whispering. She caught just enough to make her blood run cold. "Chloe said the director is already drafting the report. They're going to prove Naomi cheated." Her pencil dropped. She pressed her hands to her forehead. They're not just mocking me, she thought. They're trying to erase me completely. But what Naomi didn't know was that Mr. Alvarez had heard the same whispers. That evening, as staff cleared their offices, he lingered in the administration wing. His instincts told him something wasn't right. He approached Mrs. Delaney's office. The door was slightly ajar. Inside, Chloe sat with her father and the director, her voice carrying smug confidence. Everyone already thinks she cheated, Chloe said. If we circulate the evidence, nobody will question it. Naomi's test papers lay on the desk, marked with red ink that wasn't there before. Equations were circled with notes scrawled beside them. Suspicious similarity, unlikely knowledge, inconsistent with background. Mr. Alvarez's stomach turned. He realized what was happening. They were manufacturing proof. Careful, Dr. Whitmore warned. We can't be seen as cruel. We'll frame it as concern. A student like her simply overstepped. Chloe smirked. By the time we're done, she'll never set foot here again. Mr. Alvarez slipped away before they saw him. His heart pounded. This wasn't just prejudice anymore. It was sabotage. The next morning, Naomi sat in class, barely listening. Her mind swirled with dread. She could feel the walls closing in. When the bell rang, Mr. Alvarez approached her desk. Naomi, he said softly, come see me after school. Fear flickered in her eyes. Am I in trouble? No, he said firmly, but you need to hear something. That evening, Naomi sat across from him in the math department office. Papers were spread across the desk, copies of her test side by side with the ones he had pulled from the records. This, Mr. Alvarez said, pointing to the altered version, isn't your work. Someone changed it. They're trying to make it look like you cheated. Naomi's breath caught. Her worst fears confirmed. Why? Why are they doing this to me? He met her eyes. Because you embarrassed people who don't like to be proven wrong. Because you showed them a truth they can't deny. And they'd rather destroy you than admit it. Tears stung Naomi's eyes. Then I've already lost. They'll never listen to me over them. Mr. Alvarez shook his head. Don't lose faith. Truth doesn't stay buried forever. But you need to be strong. This fight isn't over. Naomi gripped her grandmother's necklace. Her hands shook, but fire sparked in her chest. If they want to fight, she whispered, then I won't run. The teacher nodded, pride and sorrow mingling in his gaze. Good, because soon the council will decide your fate. And when that day comes, you'll need every ounce of strength. Outside, the school bell echoed across the courtyard like a warning. Naomi stepped into the twilight, her heart heavy but resolute. The lies were closing in, but the truth was finally stirring. The oak-paneled boardroom smelled of leather and old books. On the walls hung portraits of Riverton's founders, pale, stern men gazing down with pride. A long, polished table stretched through the center, where members of the academic council sat in silence. Their robes and badges gleamed under the chandeliers. At one end, Mrs. Delaney adjusted her glasses, papers stacked neatly before her. Dr. R. Whitmore sat beside her, his presence heavy. His daughter Chloe perched smugly in the front row of the observers' gallery. Students whispered from the back, eager for the spectacle. At the other end of the table sat Naomi Carter, alone. Her patched backpack lay at her feet. Her hands trembled slightly, but her eyes burned steady. Around her neck, the tiny necklace glinted faintly in the light. The head of the council, Dean Harrington, cleared his throat. We are here to determine whether Miss Carter's scholarship candidacy remains valid, in light of serious concerns regarding the integrity of her work. Murmurs rippled through the gallery. Naomi's stomach tightened. Mrs. Delaney rose gracefully, her voice sharp as glass. Esteemed colleagues, the evidence is undeniable. This student, while perhaps earnest, could not possibly have solved the problems presented. The anomalies in her exam papers are clear indicators of misconduct. For the integrity of Riverton, we must revoke her candidacy. She slid the altered test papers across the table. Red circles marked supposed inconsistencies. Chloe smirked as the council members bent over the pages. Naomi clenched her fists. Her voice shook as she stood. "That's not my work. Someone changed those papers." A scoff rose from Chloe. "How convenient." Dean Harrington raised a hand for silence. "Do you have proof of this claim, Miss Carter?" Naomi opened her mouth, but no words came. She had no proof. Only truth. Her throat ached with the weight of it. And then, the doors burst open. Mr. Alvarez strode in, a folder in his hand. His eyes burned with urgency. "I have the proof." Gasps swept the room. Mrs. Delaney stiffened, her mask cracking for the first time. Alvarez placed 2 sets of papers before the council. "Here's the original copy of Naomi Carter's exam filed in the archives, and here," he held up the altered version Mrs. Delaney had presented, "is the forgery. The handwriting is inconsistent, the ink different. Even the paper stock doesn't match. Someone tampered with the evidence." The council members leaned closer, whispering. Dean Harrington frowned deeply. "This is a serious accusation, Mr. Alvarez. Are you suggesting fraud within this institution?" Alvarez's voice rang firm. "I'm suggesting the truth. Naomi Carter did not cheat. She solved those problems on her own, and she did what few in this school have ever dared. She proved she belongs." All eyes turned to Mrs. Delaney. Her lips tightened, but before she could speak, Chloe leapt up. "This is ridiculous. She's nothing. She doesn't belong here. She'll ruin Riverton's reputation." Her outburst silenced the room. The words, dripping with entitlement, echoed louder than she intended. Dean Harrington's eyes hardened. He turned back to Naomi. "Miss Carter, do you have anything to say in your defense?" Naomi rose slowly. Her voice was quiet, but every word struck with weight. "I don't have a family name. I don't have wealth or privilege. All I have are numbers and the truth they carry. If that isn't enough for Riverton, then maybe Riverton isn't what it claims to be." The room froze. Even the portraits on the walls seemed to listen. For the first time since stepping into Riverton, Naomi didn't feel small. She felt seen. Dean Harrington leaned back, his face unreadable. "The council will deliberate." He struck the gavel, but as Naomi sat down, she knew something had already shifted. The lies had cracked. The truth had knocked. And soon the door would open wide. The council chamber was silent as the members filed back into the room. Naomi sat rigid in her chair, her heart pounding. Her hands gripped her grandmother's necklace so tightly it pressed into her palm. Chloe lounged in the front row, her smirk returning, whispering to her friends. "They'll never side with her. Watch." Mrs. Delaney straightened her jacket, regaining her icy composure. Dr. Whitmore's face was unreadable, though his eyes betrayed unease. Mr. Alvarez stood quietly behind Naomi, his presence a steady anchor. Dean Harrington cleared his throat. His voice carried across the chamber, solemn and deliberate. "After reviewing the evidence, this council has reached a decision. The alterations to Miss Carter's exam papers are undeniable. The original documents confirm her work. Therefore, the accusations of dishonesty are dismissed." Gasps rippled through the gallery. Naomi's chest tightened, tears welling in her eyes. The dean continued, his gaze sweeping across the room. "Furthermore, Miss Carter's performance demonstrates exceptional intellect, resilience, and integrity. Qualities this institution claims to prize. For that reason, the council has voted, unanimously." He paused, his voice ringing like a bell. "To grant Naomi Carter full admission to Riverton Preparatory with a complete scholarship." The room erupted. Some students applauded, others whispered furiously. Chloe shot to her feet. "This is absurd. She doesn't deserve—" "Sit down, Miss Whitmore," Dean Harrington snapped, his voice sharper than steel. For once, Chloe obeyed. Mrs. Delaney's face flushed crimson. Her mask of authority cracked, exposing the bitterness beneath. She tried to speak, but the dean cut her off. "This council will also open an inquiry into the mishandling of Miss Carter's exam. Integrity must apply to staff as much as to students." All eyes turned to Delaney. Shame, heavy and suffocating, filled the room. Naomi rose slowly, her legs trembling. She didn't know what to say. She only whispered, barely audible but clear enough for those closest to hear. "Thank you, Lord." Her words weren't for the council. They were for the one who had carried her through fire. Mr. Alvarez smiled, pride shining in his eyes. "You did it," he said softly. Naomi shook her head, tears slipping free. "We did it. God did it." Outside, the crowd of students poured into the courtyard. Some rushed to congratulate her. Daniel Green, the debate captain, pushed through, his smile genuine. "You proved them all wrong," he said. "Don't ever let them silence you again." Naomi smiled weakly, still overwhelmed. "I won't." From the steps above, Chloe glared down, her fists clenched, her face burning with humiliation. For once, the whispers weren't about Naomi. They were about her. Can you believe Chloe tried to frame her? Her family's influence won't save her this time. The tide had turned. Naomi stood in the courtyard, the golden crest of Riverton gleaming above the doors. She wasn't just a visitor anymore. She belonged. Not because the council said so, but because she had fought, endured, and proven her worth. She lifted her face to the sky, whispering a prayer her grandmother had taught her. "The Lord is my light and my salvation. Whom shall I fear?" For the first time in her life, Naomi didn't feel like the orphan who had nothing. She felt like the girl who had everything that mattered: faith, truth, and strength no one could take away. The proud had been humbled, the orphan had triumphed, and justice had finally, undeniably come. Have you ever suffered injustice but won in the end? Share your story in the comments. Do you believe that God never abandons the righteous? Write it below. Never lose hope. Justice may take time, but it always comes.